I remember the way Ethan leaned against the doorway that morning, his voice softer than it had been in weeks. "I want tonight to be special," he said, almost like a rehearsal. For a moment, I didn't know if I should smile or question it. His sudden warmth felt foreign, almost suspicious, yet a part of me longed for it. For months, we had drifted like strangers sharing the same roof, speaking in fragments and silences more than sentences. Now, his eyes carried an intensity I couldn't quite place. Not tenderness, not anger, but something layered in between. I tried to steady my breath. Special, he'd said. A word that once meant candlelit dinners, whispered promises, the brush of his hand against mine. Lately, it only reminded me of anniversaries forgotten, apologies left unsaid. "Really?" I asked, my tone cautious, betraying my doubt. Ethan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You'll see. Just trust me, Claire." The words echoed heavier than they should have. Trust me. They had once been my anchor, but lately they sounded more like an order than a comfort. All day I moved through the house as though preparing for an exam I hadn't studied for. The kitchen smelled faintly of coffee and dust. The clock ticked louder than usual. Even the quiet hum of the refrigerator seemed to press against me, reminding me how unprepared I was for whatever tonight meant. I caught myself staring at our wedding photo in the hallway, the two of us frozen in sunlight, laughter spilling out of a moment long gone. The memory stabbed at me. Who had we become? By evening, I dressed carefully, though my hands trembled. A simple black dress, understated, the kind he used to love. In the mirror, my reflection looked like a woman rehearsing happiness. When Ethan finally appeared, his cologne hit me first. Sharp, deliberate, intoxicating. He held out his hand, the gesture oddly formal. "Ready?" I nodded, though my chest ached with unspoken questions. The night had been promised as romance, yet as we stepped into the car, I felt an invisible thread tighten around me. Where he was leading me, I didn't know. But the way he gripped the wheel, silent and focused, told me this wasn't about love. It was about something else, and I was already afraid. The drive felt longer than it should have. Each mile stretching beneath the tires in weighted silence. Ethan barely spoke, his hands steady on the wheel, eyes fixed on the road as though nothing else existed. I pressed my palms together in my lap, my heartbeat quickening with every turn that pulled us farther from the city lights. "Where are we going?" I finally asked, forcing a lightness into my voice. "You'll see," he replied, his tone clipped but oddly rehearsed, like a man hiding a surprise behind his back. When the car finally stopped, I saw it, a cabin nestled deep among tall pines, its windows glowing faintly with candlelight. For a fleeting second, relief washed over me. It was beautiful, almost cinematic, like the kind of retreat couples booked to fix what was broken. Inside, the air smelled of pine wood and wax. A bottle of red wine waited on the table, flanked by 2 glasses, and dozens of candles flickered across the room, their flames soft and seductive. My chest tightened. He had prepared all of this. "It's lovely," I whispered, though the words stumbled out more like a question than a compliment. Ethan moved behind me, resting his hand at the small of my back. I wanted tonight to remind us of what we used to have. For a moment, I let myself believe him. We sat across from each other at the small wooden table, candlelight dancing across his face, sharpening his jawline, deepening the shadows beneath his eyes. The wine loosened my tongue, and I almost felt warmth return between us, until the cracks began to show. "Do you ever regret?" he asked suddenly, swirling the liquid in his glass. My fork stilled mid-air. "Regret what?" His eyes lifted sharp and unblinking. "Choices, people, things you've kept from me." The room seemed to shrink, the warmth of the candles turning into heat against my skin. I forced a laugh, brittle at the edges. "Why bring that up now?" "Because," he said quietly, his smile faint but edged with something darker, "tonight is about truth." The wine turned bitter on my tongue. I set the glass down, realizing this wasn't romance. It was a stage he had built, a perfect setup not for love, but for something far heavier, and I wasn't sure I wanted to know what came next. The knife scraped against my plate, the sound sharp in the quiet cabin. Ethan's eyes never left me, even as he lifted his fork with deliberate calm. Candlelight flickered across his face, shifting between warmth and shadow, soft one moment and sinister the next. I forced myself to smile. This is good. Did you cook it all yourself? He leaned back, lips curling. Of course. You deserve effort, don't you? The words landed strangely, heavy with sarcasm, though his tone was smooth. I sipped my wine to steady myself, but the glass trembled faintly in my hand. Something in his gaze pinned me to my seat, as though the romance was a performance and I was the audience he intended to corner. So, he began, casually slicing his meat. Do you still talk to anyone from before us? The question was innocent enough on the surface, but I felt the barbs beneath it. I swallowed hard. Not really. Life changes, people drift. Interesting, his smile widened, though his eyes stayed cold. I found an old message in your phone. From Daniel. Do you remember him? My stomach twisted. Daniel, a name I hadn't spoken in years. I set my fork down slowly, careful not to reveal too much. That was nothing. A friend reaching out, nothing more. Nothing more. He repeated the words as though tasting them, rolling them across his tongue like poison. Funny how you never mentioned it. The candles wavered in the draft, their shadows stretching along the walls, tall and thin like silent witnesses. The room felt smaller with every passing second. I tried to breathe evenly, but the air pressed against my chest. Ethan leaned forward, his face carved by shifting flame. I want honesty tonight, Claire. That's all I've ever wanted. But his voice wasn't asking, it was commanding. And in the glow of the staged romance, I realized I was less a wife being wooed, and more a suspect being interrogated. I lowered my gaze, heart pounding. This dinner wasn't about love. It was the beginning of something darker, something I couldn't yet name. The silence after dinner was heavier than the meal itself. Ethan cleared the plates with an eerie calm, stacking them neatly as though order could disguise the storm building inside him. I watched his movements, rigid and precise, the flicker of candlelight sharpening the planes of his face. Something about him felt unfamiliar, as if the man I had married had been replaced by a stranger wearing his skin. When he finally turned to me, his expression softened, almost tender. You know I've always loved you, right? Yes, I whispered, though my throat felt dry. His smile lingered only a second before it faltered. Then why do I feel like you've betrayed me? The question sliced through me, sharper than any knife. My chest tightened. Ethan, that's not true. I would never, wouldn't you? His voice rose, then steadied, as though he caught himself slipping. He walked toward me slowly, his eyes searching mine with unnerving intensity. I read things, Claire. Things that make me wonder if I ever knew you at all. My pulse hammered in my ears. I glanced toward my phone on the side table, but when I reached for it earlier, there had been no signal. The screen had mocked me with the absence of bars, a reminder of how far he'd taken us from anyone else. I tried to stand, but he gently pressed my shoulders back down into the chair. The pressure of his hands was firm, affectionate in appearance, but beneath it, there was control. You're imagining things, I managed, forcing my voice to stay calm. Am I? His tone twisted, half loving, half threatening. I locked the doors to keep us safe. I bring you here to rebuild us. And still, I feel lies circling around me, my breath caught. Locked doors. I hadn't noticed before. Every exit was sealed, every escape a thought he had already stolen from me. I stared at him, my heart a wild drum in my chest. What do you want from me? His eyes softened again, though the cruelty lingered beneath. Only the truth. And in that moment, I realized this night wasn't about rekindling love. It was about surviving the fracture that had just split us in two. The candles had burned lower, their wax pooling in uneven rivers across the table. The room felt smaller now, darker, though Ethan's eyes glowed with a sharp intensity that left no shadows for me to hide in. Sit with me, he said, motioning toward the couch. His tone was soft, coaxing, but there was an edge beneath it. I obeyed, my body tense, every movement heavy with dread. He sat close, too close, his arms stretched casually along the back of the couch. I need to know everything, Claire. No more secrets, my breath caught. I've told you the truth, not all of it. His voice was low, almost intimate, but each word was a demand. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, leather-bound. My stomach dropped. My diary. The sight of it made my throat close. You went through my things. I had to. His smile was faint, unnerving. You've been hiding from me. From us, the blood rushed to my ears. He opened the diary, flipping through pages with deliberate slowness. You wrote about Daniel. You wrote about the debt. You even wrote about wishing you could just leave. His gaze cut into me. Was that your plan, to run? Tears burned behind my eyes, but I shook my head. Those were thoughts, not plans. I was lost. You don't understand? Then make me understand. His hand shot out, gripping my wrist with controlled pressure. Not enough to bruise, but enough to remind me who had the power tonight. My voice cracked as I whispered. Yes, I saw Daniel once. Years ago. Yes, I borrowed money without telling you. But I never stopped loving you. I never planned to leave. The words spilled out. Confessions dragged from me like blood from a wound. His grip loosened, and he leaned back, studying me with a strange satisfaction. That's better, he murmured. Honesty. That's what I wanted all along. But his smile chilled me more than his anger. This wasn't reconciliation. It was control. A game where every truth I offered only fed his hunger for. More the night stretched before me like a trap. I could no longer see the edges of. Ethan's face darkened as though my confessions hadn't satisfied him, but instead ignited something deeper, something feral. The softness in his voice was gone now, replaced by a sharpness that cut straight through me. You lied for years, he hissed, standing abruptly. The shadow of his frame loomed across the cabin wall, flickering with the unsteady light of the candles. Do you even realize what that's done to me? I stood too, trembling but refusing to be pinned down again. I made mistakes, Ethan, but I never stopped loving you. That has to count for something. He laughed, the sound jagged and bitter. Love? You call it love when you hide things, when you make me look like a fool? Stop twisting this! My voice cracked under the weight of fear and fury. In 2 strides, he was in front of me. His hand clamped around my arm, forcing me backward until my spine pressed against the cabin wall. The wood was cold against me, the pressure of his grip unrelenting. You don't get it, he growled, his breath hot against my cheek. I gave you everything, and you poisoned it. Don't you see? You made me this way. The words sank in like venom. For a moment, doubt gnawed at me. Had I driven him here? No. No, I couldn't let him rewrite the truth. Let go of me, I whispered, trying to steady my voice. He tightened his grip. Not until you admit you destroyed us. Rage flared in me, born of fear and desperation. I shoved him with all the strength I could muster, breaking free for a second. He stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock, then narrowed into something darker. You'll regret that, he spat. My chest heaved, my hands trembling, but I forced myself to meet his gaze. I already regret everything about this night. The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the sound of our ragged breaths. His fists clenched at his sides, his body shaking with barely restrained fury. I realized then that we had passed the point of no return. Whatever this night had begun as, it would not end in peace. And somewhere outside, the sound of branches snapping in the wind hinted we were not as alone as he wanted me to believe. Ethan's chest still rose and fell with fury. His fists curled tight when the sound broke through the silence. Knock, knock. We both froze. My pulse surged, my breath catching in my throat. Another knock echoed, firmer this time, followed by a man's voice. Evening. Just checking in, saw the lights on. Ethan straightened instantly, his anger folding into a mask of composure. He glanced at me sharply, a warning flashing in his eyes. Don't you dare. I stood frozen near the wall, my arms trembling from where his grip had bruised them. The voice came again, closer now. Mr. Hall from the next cabin. Everything all right in there? Ethan forced a smile onto his face and opened the door a crack. Warm air spilled out into the night. Good evening, sir. Yes, everything's fine. My wife and I are just enjoying a late dinner. His tone was perfectly polite, even charming. Through the narrow gap, I glimpsed a man in his 60s holding a lantern. Mr. Hall's eyes shifted from Ethan to me, lingering on my pale face and clenched hands. All good, ma'am? He asked gently. I swallowed hard, desperate to scream, to beg him not to leave. My lips parted, but Ethan's hand tightened on the door frame, his body angled to block me from sight. His smile never wavered. She's fine, Ethan said smoothly. Just tired. Long week, you know how it is. Mr. Hall hesitated, suspicion flickering in his gaze. My eyes met his for a split second, pleading silently. But Ethan's presence was a wall I couldn't break through. Finally, the old man nodded, though uncertainty lingered. All right then. If you folks need anything, I'm just down the path. He tipped his lantern and stepped back into the dark. The door clicked shut, the sound final and suffocating. Ethan turned toward me, his smile dissolving into something colder. Almost ruined everything, he whispered, and I knew the night had only grown more dangerous. The door had barely latched shut behind Mr. Hall before Ethan turned on me. His eyes, once masked by a neighborly smile, now burned with rage barely contained. You wanted him to see, didn't you? His voice was low, trembling with fury. You wanted him to know you're the victim and I'm the monster. My voice cracked. I just wanted help. His hand lashed out, gripping my arm again, harder this time. The sting shot up to my shoulder. Panic flooded me, hot and suffocating, but beneath it rose something sharper. Defiance. No more, I whispered, though it came out shaky. What was that? He leaned closer, his breath heavy with wine. I shoved him, sudden and fierce, my nails scratching across his chest. He stumbled back, surprised. For a heartbeat, I saw him falter. And then he lunged. We collided near the table, the bottle of wine crashing to the floor, spilling red across the wood like blood foreshadowing blood. He tried to pin me, his weight crushing, but desperation lent me strength. I clawed, I kicked, I fought like an animal cornered. Stop! I screamed, my throat raw. Look what you're making me do, he shouted, spittle flying, his fists slamming the table beside my head. You drive me to this, Claire. Something snapped in me then. I reached for anything, my hand closing around the shard of broken glass from the shattered bottle. My arm swung before I could think, before I could breathe. The sound was sickening. A thud, a cry, the sharp crack of flesh yielding. Ethan staggered, clutching his side, his face twisting with shock. For a moment, time fractured. I couldn't tell if the crimson spreading across the floor was wine or blood. Couldn't tell if the scream ringing in my ears was his or mine. My hands shook violently, the glass shard slipping from my grip. Ethan fell to his knees, his breath ragged. You'll regret this, he gasped, blood pooling beneath him. I stumbled back, heart pounding, vision blurred with tears and terror. My body shook from the surge of adrenaline, every nerve screaming. The cabin was no longer a place of romance or truth. It was a battlefield. And as the blood crept wider across the floorboards, I couldn't tell if I had won my freedom or sealed my fate. Silence. That was the first thing I noticed when I opened my eyes. Not the pounding of Ethan's voice, not the shattering of glass. Only silence, heavy and unnatural. The room was dim, lit only by the dying glow of candle stubs. My body ached, stiff from where I had curled against the wall, too afraid to move after the fight. Slowly, I forced myself upright. The scene before me was a nightmare frozen in place. Shards of glass glinted across the floor like scattered teeth. The air reeked of wine, copper, and sweat. And there, sprawled on the wooden boards, was Ethan. His shirt clung to him, soaked through. His chest rose faintly, uneven, but he was still. Too still, my pulse thundered. He's alive. He has to be alive. But if he was, what would he do when he woke? I staggered to my feet, hands trembling. Every step I took felt like wading through quicksand. My gaze darted between the phone on the table and the locked door. No signal, no escape. Call the police, I whispered to myself. Tell them the truth. But the truth twisted in my mind, tangled and ugly. Would they believe me? Or would they see only blood on the floor, glass in my hand, and a wife standing over her husband? I pressed my palms to my temples, my breath shallow. My reflection stared back at me in the window pane. Pale, hollow-eyed, almost unrecognizable. I looked like guilt. I grabbed a towel, pressing it against Ethan's side, though my hands shook too badly to keep steady. Stay with me, I muttered, though I wasn't sure if it was a plea for him or for myself. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. I couldn't tell. The weight of the cabin pressed down on me. Each creak of the floorboards a reminder that I was trapped. By the walls. By the night. By the choices I had made. Finally I stood, staring at the blood that refused to vanish no matter how tightly I pressed the towel. My throat tightened. There were only two paths left. Run and live with the stain of cowardice, or stay and face what the truth might cost me. And both felt like prisons. The walls were the color of smoke, bare and suffocating. A single bulb hummed overhead, spilling pale light across the cold metal table between me and them. Two detectives, one silent, one sharp-eyed, leaned forward, their pens scratching whenever I opened my mouth. I clasped my hands together, trying to steady them, but the tremor wouldn't stop. "I told you," I said, my voice raw. "He brought me there." "He promised it was supposed to be a special night." Detective Harris tilted his head, his gaze piercing. "Special night that ended in blood," he said flatly. "You said he attacked you. Yet there are bruises on his arms, defensive wounds. From you," the words stabbed at me. I felt the floor tilt, my mind spiraling back to the cabin, the shattered glass, the blood seeping into the boards. My chest tightened. "I was defending myself," I whispered, though it sounded fragile even to me. The other detective, Monroe, leaned closer. "Mrs. Bennett, your timeline doesn't add up. You claim you woke after the fight, that you didn't know if he was alive, but your neighbor swears he heard shouting after midnight. Hours later, I froze. My throat burned as I tried to find words that didn't exist. Every detail of the night pressed against me, sharp and unbearable. Ethan's voice still echoed in my head. "You drove me to this." "I don't." I swallowed hard, staring down at the table. "I don't remember everything. It was chaos. I was terrified." Harris scribbled again, his pen deliberate, damning. "Convenient memory loss," he muttered. The silence stretched until it felt like a noose tightening. My reflection stared back at me from the polished surface of the table, pale, hollow-eyed, broken. I wanted to scream that I was the victim, that I had been trapped in his twisted game, but the words dissolved in my throat. Instead, I sat there trembling, listening to the relentless scratching of their pens. Finally, Monroe's voice sliced the quiet. "You'll have your chance in court, Claire. But understand this, right now your story looks less like survival." His eyes narrowed. "And more like murder." The bulb above flickered, casting me in fractured light. For the first time, I wondered if they were right. The air in the interrogation room thickened when Detective Harris slid a thin folder across the table. My trembling hands hovered, reluctant, before I pulled it open. Inside were photographs. The cabin, the bloodied floor, but also letters. Pages from my diary, my handwriting. "My secrets? Your husband had these," Harris said coldly. "He copied every page. He knew about the debt, about the affair, even about your doubts in the marriage." I felt my stomach drop, bile rising in my throat. He read them?" My voice cracked and my chest constricted with shame. "Those pages were never meant for anyone's eyes. They were the only place I could breathe freely, confess silently, without judgment." Detective Monroe's voice was sharper. Not only did he read them, he planned that night around them. The candles, the wine, the seclusion. He wasn't trying to win you back. He was baiting you. He wanted a confrontation. My pulse pounded in my ears. Memories clicked together like broken glass, forming a picture. His sudden charm, the probing questions, the accusations whispered between forced tenderness. It hadn't been a romantic night. It had been an ambush. I clenched the edge of the folder, my knuckles white. "So he set me up," I whispered. "He wanted to destroy me." Monroe's gaze didn't soften. "Or test you. Either way, you played your part." The words sliced deeper than any blade. Rage and grief collided inside me. How could Ethan, the man I once trusted with my life, craft such a cruel trap? And how could I not see it until now? Harris leaned back, his eyes calculating. "But here's the irony, Claire. He wanted to expose you. Yet in the end, he's the one lying in a morgue. His revenge turned on him. Fate reversed the roles." I pressed my palms against my temples, the room spinning. Was it fate? Or had my hands written the ending without my knowing? The photographs blurred before me, smudges of ink and blood. Ethan's voice rang in my skull, mocking, condemning, reminding me that love had curdled into hatred long before the first candle was lit. And in that moment, one truth became undeniable. The man who promised me forever had built a cage, but I was the one who broke it. The trial ended not with triumph, but with silence. The gavel struck, the verdict delivered, and yet none of it felt real. Words like self-defense and reasonable doubt swirled around me, but they were hollow sounds, stripped of comfort. Freedom, they called it. But what kind of freedom is built on blood and ashes? I walked out of the courthouse into a world that looked unchanged. The same gray sky, the same restless wind. Yet I was altered in ways no one could see. Strangers glanced at me with curiosity, pity, or suspicion, but none of them knew the weight pressing on my chest. None of them heard his voice still echoing in the quiet of my mind. At night I replayed it all. The candles, the locked doors, his probing eyes. Ethan had promised me a romantic evening, and in a way he delivered. Only it was romance suffocated by betrayal, dressed in cruelty. He planned it as revenge, but fate rewrote his ending through my trembling hands. That truth lingered like poison. Some mornings I woke convinced I had no choice, that survival demanded sacrifice. Other mornings the doubt consumed me. Had I crossed a line? Had I become the monster he claimed I was? I thought justice would bring peace, but justice doesn't erase memory. It doesn't silence the sound of blood hitting the floor, or the shattering of glass, or the way his eyes burned even as he fell. I stood once more at the cabin weeks later, the boards scarred with stains that no cleaning could erase. The air still smelled of smoke and damp wood, but underneath lingered something heavier, a reminder that some places never let you leave whole. I whispered into the emptiness. I survived, but the word caught in my throat. Survival wasn't victory. It was a sentence of its own. The world would never know all the secrets between us, the ones Ethan unearthed and the ones I still kept buried. They would never know how thin the line is between love and destruction. In the end, I wasn't freed or condemned. I was both. A woman marked forever by a night that promised romance and delivered ruin.